Antarctica, the most deserted, the most inhospitable continent, but one of the most beautiful places on Earth, epitomised by gigantic icebergs and vast mountain ranges. A continent of enormous emptiness, where wind speeds top 320 kilometers per hour and temperatures plunge as low as minus 93 degrees centigrade. I first visited Antarctica in 2006 as a long-distance runner to take part in the first ice marathon. I flew into Antarctica in an Aleutian transport plane from Punta Arenas. We flew over Drake's Passage and the landmass of Antarctica, and after 4 hours landed on our runway, a 1-mile strip of blue ice at Patriot Hills, a private camp situated just 600 miles from the South Pole. The camp revolved around the communal tent, which functioned as a common room and a dining room. I slept in one of the 2-person tents scattered close to this main base. I will never forget the experience of landing on the runway with its cobbled street appearance. Although it was 11 p.m, it was also broad daylight, and it remained like this for the whole time I was in Antarctica. I recall the thrill of thinking that I was standing in a spot that perhaps had been visited by some of my heroes, Scott, Amundsen, and Shackleton. If they had indeed stood here, then apart from the tents in the near distance, they would have seen exactly the same view that I was trying to absorb. The following day I ran the inaugural ice marathon, 26.2 miles on ice and snow, with temperatures of minus 20 degrees centigrade and wind speeds of over 50 miles per hour. At times I ran in complete isolation with not a soul visible as far as the eye could see. Despite the conditions, I managed to complete the marathon in 6 hours and 41 minutes, and in doing so became the 9th person in the world ever to run a marathon inside the Antarctic Circle. I got a medal and I got 2 t-shirts. But as I developed my interest in photography, and coupled with my long-standing love for nature, I knew I needed to return to this enticing but foreboding continent. In 2006, I had not seen icebergs, penguins, seals, or any of the other natural phenomena of Antarctica. So it did not take me long to confirm that I was signing up when my friend Tom suggested a trip to Antarctica. On this occasion, my point of embarkation was Port Stanley in the Falklands, and I was travelling by boat and not by plane. After some time wandering around Port Stanley, photographing some of the local buildings, the memorial to those who died in the Falklands War, and inevitably Thatcher Drive, I headed with trepidation to the actual port for the first sight of my home for the next 3 weeks, the MV Ushuaia. Clearly, this was not a luxury cruise ship with stabilizers. It is an adapted scientific and exploration vessel. It has a round-bottomed 4-meter keel and no stabilizers. I headed down into the bowels of the Ushuaia to my cabin with bunk beds, which I was sharing with Tom. To say we had limited space would be a gross understatement, and on this occasion, I was not flying over Drake's Passage, but rocking and rolling my way through it over a period of 3 days. Fortunately, the Ushuaia was well equipped with vomit bags every few meters. I cannot believe that I didn't need them, although 50% of those on board were confined to their beds for at least part of the trip. After 3 days we arrived at South Georgia, at last able to walk on dry land at Right Whale Bay. My main target as a photographer was wildlife, and during this first landing I was able to photograph 4-ton elephant seals, fur seals and king penguins, as well as enjoying the landscape. However, after 24 hours and just after dinner, tragedy struck. One of the passengers had a fall, sustaining fatal injuries. Everyone on board was stunned and emotionally traumatized as the Ushuaia headed towards Grytviken. There was time to take in the post office, the museum, the church, the football pitch, and the old whaling facilities. And for me, most importantly, the grave of Ernest Shackleton, whose name will be forever associated with South Georgia. Leaving Grytviken behind, we headed to Jason Harbour. We were well wrapped up, but the elephant seal pups were feeding in rapidly deteriorating conditions, and the king penguins turned their backs against the worst of the storm. At Salisbury Plain, I watched small groups of king penguins waddling right in front of me, and elephant seals lay basking at the edge of the ocean. Salisbury Plain is home to massive numbers of king penguin chicks living in large rookeries guarded by one adult, while the individual chick waits for its own parent to return from a fishing trip with food. The large colonies of thousands of youngsters stretched as far as the eye could see, noisy, bustling, but above everything else, smelly. Our final destination before leaving South Georgia was Gold Harbour, so called because the sun's rays make the cliffs yellow with their light in the morning and evening. I had my first encounter with gentoo penguins and fur seals, which may look cute, but are actually very vicious. The Falklands coroner insisted that the Ushuaia had to return to the Falklands, and then due to the weather and time limitations, we were unable to return to Antarctica. We stayed in the Falklands visiting a number of the islands, a great photographic experience and one which I very much enjoyed. I was able to photograph king penguins, gentoo penguins and Magellanic penguins, surfing the water, hopping onto the beach with an oncoming wave, playing or frolicking, or just having a stroll down the beach. I was able to get up very close and personal to large numbers of black-browed albatross as they sat on their nests in large colonies on the cliffs with precipitous drops to the sea. The appropriately named rockhopper penguins were interspersed amongst the albatross, and one had to wonder why they had their nests so far up the cliff and had to undertake an arduous journey each time they came back from the sea with food for their chicks. Other birds that I saw were snipe on Carcass Island and Antarctic shag, a relative of our own cormorant and shag. The Falklands was a memorable experience, but I had not made it to Antarctica, and I returned home emotionally distressed at the outcome for my fellow passenger and frustrated that I had not achieved my aim of reaching the mainland of Antarctica. I knew I had unfinished business. The opportunity cropped up to travel once again on the MV Ushuaia as it headed 5 weeks later back to Antarctica. This time I travelled with my other photographic friend David, who like me had been on the first trip. We knew what to expect and settled down for a few tedious days crossing Drake's Passage for the third time. As we travelled, we were able to photograph albatross, which accompanied us effortlessly, and also some distant, and on occasions not so distant icebergs. Our first major sighting was Wilhelmina Bay on the Antarctic Peninsula, discovered by a Belgian expedition and named after Wilhelmina, Queen of the Netherlands. We were able to explore the bay in the small zodiacs which were lowered from the MV Ushuaia and were the only way to get on land. A Weddell seal lay on the ice, enjoying the sunshine. On the same day, we were able to explore Danko Island. It is one of the places where it is possible to make a continental landing, but we explored the icebergs and mountains from our zodiacs, while the Ushuaia anchored in a sheltered bay, surrounded by icebergs and snow-covered mountain ranges. After a beautiful sunrise, we headed to the appropriately named Paradise Bay. I actually walked on terra firma, and for the first time since my marathon was now in Antarctica. But along with David, I stayed for just a few minutes. We'd been given the opportunity of getting back into the zodiacs. For just over an hour, and in perfect conditions, our zodiac quietly meandered around a vast expanse of icebergs. The water was still, the sky was blue, and there was no wind. We watched, enjoyed, and then photographed icebergs of different shapes, sizes, textures and colours, cave-like structures, miniature mountain ranges, and ice-sculpted chess pieces. An unforgettable time, and it made the effort to return so worthwhile. As we left Paradise Bay and headed to Two Hummock Island, we were accompanied by humpback whales, and what a privilege to watch these 15-metre long and 30-tonne mammals repeatedly displaying against a backdrop of snow-covered mountains. The day finished with a landing at Hydrogaga Rock to photograph Weddell seals and chin-strap penguins. The next day found us on shore at Gordon Island, just north of the Antarctic Peninsula. This island has been identified as an important bird area by BirdLife International, as it supports a large breeding colony of about 14,000 pairs of Adelie penguins, as well as over 550 pairs of Gentoo penguins. And in an area where it is not even supposed to live, I was able to photograph a solitary macaroni penguin, as well as a skua disturbing an egg laid by one of the pairs of Adelie penguins. As we left Gordon Island, we headed towards the Weddell Sea, which was a mass of ice floes and bergs, and at the time was impenetrable. It is said by some to be the most treacherous and dismal region on Earth. In 1915, Shackleton's ship Endurance got trapped and was crushed by ice in this sea. The bergs were home to groups of penguins and a crab-eater seal. My journey was complete. That is apart from another 2 days rocking and rolling my way back to the Ushuaia. The end of the world and the end of my journey. But memories remain.